Ladies and gentlemen, I've received a donation with a question about water rights and how and what and where. For example, using all the water in a river so none can run downstream, polluting a river so pollution does run downstream, damming up a river so that you flood people up above you, for example. What can be done, what should be allowed, and so on. And I've recently read a book called The Great Plains, history about the Great Plains by Walter Prescott Webb that's strangely applicable. It's actually got a rather dry, excuse the pun, chapter on irrigation and land and water. And it surprised me. I thought that there would be sort of a set of rights or something that could be developed for waterways, and that would be what would be just fine. But the author goes over painstakingly for about 20 pages how the water rights in England that were transferred to New England and to the South in America, to the eastern seaboard, how those water rights didn't work when they got further out into the plains where it was drier, and then you get clear into the mountain west and it didn't work at all, and they virtually didn't use English common law. And so there's a little map I'm going to try to show you now, and I know the mirror image thing's going on here terribly, but this map I hope is instructive. This is the United States if you turn it backwards and look at it mirror image, but here's the eastern seaboard out that way, and that used Old English law. Then this used a modified version of English law, as did California, modified version of English law. But this area in here in the Mountain West basically didn't use English law at all, very, very little of it, and developed an entirely new way to deal with water. For example, in the East, if you dam up some land, as long as it doesn't flood your neighbors upstream, you're good to go, as long as once the dam is there and filled, more water comes down. Now that's not a problem in most of England and most of the eastern United States. You couldn't build a significant dam to stop the water flow for too long. And so that wasn't really an issue they had to deal with. But once you get the large areas out in west with deep river ravines and stuff, a dam that a farmer could build could conceivably stop the creek from running for months or even years. So that was a new position, a new situation they had never dealt with before. That had to be, a law had to be figured out and evolved in that situation. And what happened was they would measure the amount that a stream put out, and they measure it in acre feet. 1 acre of water a foot deep. How many acre feet does the stream produce per year? And each landowner would be allowed a certain amount of that stream. And of course people cheated and stole, and you could have to go to court and stuff, and it was fairly hectic. But to the point that law could make inroads on it, they had to recognize that individuals who lived by the stream or bought land in the stream's watershed area had a right to some of the water in that stream. You couldn't separate the water from the land. So that was a new problem they hadn't had to deal with so much in England and the East. How much water can you use out of a stream? Because you could never use it all. Now, as for polluting the river, there have been laws going both ways on that. There have been laws that said you can pollute the river. It's like the air, it's public good, and you can't complain. It carries stuff away, people can pollute it. There were laws on that side upheld by judges and written by legislators who believed in industrializing and so on, and they wanted industry to have a cheap way to get rid of its stuff without having lawsuits and so on. But more and more the laws recognize the rights of people. Well, now they definitely do, but more and more they came to recognize the rights of people downstream. And the fact is that the lesson to learn here isn't necessarily in lawmaking. The lesson to learn here is about wealth and freedom and capitalism. The fact that people didn't have enough wealth to worry about the river. The rivers had always been filthy. They used to be the places to put corpses. If the guy couldn't afford burial, throw it in the river. It used to be the place where people got their public drinking water and all their sewers ran into it. The rivers have always been filthy, horrid places. The question is, how do we clean them up? And we clean them up by becoming wealthy enough to do that, not by just making a law saying you can't pollute. You have to have the wealth first before you can recognize people's right to a clean environment. You couldn't go back in the Middle Ages and say people have a right to health care and they have a right to a clean environment. There's no health care around. There's no way to make the clean environment. Who's going to pay for it? So the question of rights as far as pollution goes, that's a question of industrialization. Ironically, it's bizarre, but the more industrialized a country is, the cleaner it is. And the people have less filth in their lives and less filth in their society and in the countryside. And now, the way to violate that rule is to try it under communism or socialism. And if you know about the ecological disasters in former Soviet Russia, you know how bad it can be when it's done in the public interests. But if you do it in the guise of, if you do it for the sake of private profits, you get what we have in America, and answerable to the courts for damaging other people. Like I said, the wealth has to come in first. You can't just go out and make a law without the wealth being there to uphold it. Just like you couldn't have made a law saying that there is no murder unless you've got the wealth to pay people to go around and gather up murderers. When they made murder illegal first in ancient Athens, they had to provide some bureaucratic basis to administer that. There had to be a state there. So laws always mean you have to have the money to enforce the laws. I'm in favor of, anti-pollution, so that if I buy a house on the river, you can't dump nuclear waste in 3 feet up above. Right. I've got rights to a clean running waterway. So you can't say that, though, when everybody's starving to death and there's no wealth. As for damming a river, that is quite a question. As long as it doesn't flood your neighbor's ground, I think that's the first and obvious one. And as long as a sufficient stream makes it through, as long as your part of the stream, say 1/12 of, if you own 12 or 18% or whatever of this valley, you get that part of the water. And if you can fill your dam using just that much and let the rest through, I don't see why anyone could argue against that. But you couldn't dam it up and keep everyone else's stream. They call them streams. A stream is a certain number of acre-feet per hour. And we call a stream, the lay people call a stream just a little babbling brook or something. But in farmers' terms, a stream is a certain amount of water. You couldn't take your stream out and other people's streams to fill your dam. So that's simply recognizing individual rights again. All these questions can be hammered out. The Great Plains by Walter Prescott Webb. Sir, I'd like to call him Sir. It's just an American, though. That's a pretty good book to learn more about the dry facts of irrigation and water rights.